Hello, third graders. Welcome back to school. So, we are continuing on with our story of the Littles. And this week, last time we read, a week and a half ago, it was about how they found a mouse and that the Littles were really concerned because the people that are renting the house don't seem to realize that there's a mouse in there. So, remember, the brother dresses up in a costume and he runs across the thing to try and scare Mrs. Newcomb to show her that there are mice, and now she's scared and she wants to get rid of the mice, which is exactly what they wanted to have happen. So now we're on. So here's like the little picture of the boy. Remember, he's dressed up. He really, really looks like a mouse because the littles have tails, remember? They look like people with tails, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, okay, so we're on chapter 8. We're almost done with the book, which is kind of cool. And then we'll move on to the next book of the littles. Okay, the littles were very pleased with the success of Tom's plan. That's the little mouse that dressed up. Mr. Little couldn't get over it. "I wish you that all could have seen Tom," he said. Zip! He went right across the floor. "It's a mouse!" yelled Mrs. Newcomb. "Oh my!" It was something to see. He is a little all right," said Uncle Pete. He has the little bravery." "I only had a little bravery is right, Uncle Pete," said Tom. "I was really kind of scared." All the littles laughed except for Uncle Pete. "Tom Little, you ripped this mouse's costume," said Granny Little. She was looking at it under a light. "I'm sorry, Granny," said Tom. "I was going so fast I couldn't stop when I got to the other side of the room. I tore out a nail under the radiator." "I'll fix it," said Granny. "You can wear it in the next Halloween." "I hate mice," said Lucy. "Don't wear that thing ever again, please." "Granny did a wonderful job on the costume," said Mr. Little. "But, well, no one really likes it. Do you know what I mean?" No sense in wasting all that good work," said Granny Little. She started sewing. "We may need it again." "I am not leaving this room until the mice are gone," said Lucy. Lucy's the sister. "They'll be gone in a few days," said Mr. Little. "You'll see. Everything's going to be all right now." "I say we give Miss the Newcombs a helping hand," said Uncle Pete. He picked up a sword and made it, he made it that he had made with one of Mrs. Big's needles. "On guard!" Uncle Pete limped forward, waving the sword and stabbing the air. "Take that! You take that, you mouse!" "Oh, goodness! Uncle Pete, you put that thing down," said Mrs. Little. "I hate to see those weapons around." She turned to her husband. "When can we put them back in the chest?" "As soon as the mice are gone," said Mr. Little. "I figure a few days at most. In the meantime, I want all of you to watch out for the mouse traps. We don't want accidents now that our troubles are almost over." "Why don't we stay in our rooms for the next few days?" said Mrs. Little. "Then we'll all be safe from the traps and the mice." Uncle Pete, um, Uncle Pete did not think so. We should know what's going on at all times," he said. "Bad business sticking your head into the stand like an ostrich." "Let's look around once a day," said Mr. Little. "That should be enough." "I'm going down to the kitchen first thing tomorrow morning," said Uncle Pete. "I want to see those mouse traps with my own eyes." "May I go with Uncle Pete this time?" said Tom. "Lucy doesn't want to go. Do you, Lucy?" "I am not leaving my room," said the mouse, "until the mice are gone," said Lucy. "Now I will, not for one little second will I be down there." And she's cute. This is little Lucy, and that's the mouse costume that she's afraid of. She does not like that. And that's the end of chapter 8. So I'll just read the beginning of chapter 9. It's not very long. The next morning, Mr. Little was walking back and forth in the Little's kitchen. Mrs. Little and Lucy sat at a table watching him. Granny Little was sitting at a table too, knitting. Mr. Little kept looking up at the clock on the wall. 10 o'clock, he said, "and they're not here. They should have come back a half an hour ago." "Who's not here?" said Granny Little. "Uncle Pete and Tom," said Mr. Little. "They went to the kitchen to see if the mouse traps had been set." "What shall we do?" said Mrs. Little. Mr. Little strapped on his sword. "I'm going to go find them," he said. "They're probably all right, but I can't stand waiting any longer." "I'd better go with you," said Mrs. Little. "Nope, I can handle it alone," said Mr. Little. "I want you to stay here with Granny, just in case." "Do you think mice would come here?" "But no, but you can't be sure," said Mr. Little. "They did in '35. When there was enough of them, they'll start trying anything." When Mr. Little got to the kitchen, he could not find Uncle Pete or Tom. He didn't see any mouse traps either. Uh-oh. What do you think happened? He went to the cellar, still no sign of the boy or his uncle, and there was no mouse traps in the cellar. Something's wrong, thought Mr. Little. Mr. Little went to the garbage can. There had to be mouse traps in here. It was the best place to catch a mouse. But there were none, and still no sign of the missing Littles. It is very strange, thought Mr. Little. No mice traps, and no Tom or Pete. He decided to return to the kitchen. That's where Uncle Pete wanted to go in the first place. So Mr. Little turned back and headed for the kitchen. Meanwhile, back at the Littles' rooms, Lucy was thinking about her father. Suppose he needs someone to send a message or something. I should have gone with him, she thought. She looked into the living room. Granny Little was sitting in her chair by the fireplace. Lucy's mom was watching the door, a kitchen knife in her lap. I should be with my father, thought Lucy. Then suddenly she made up her mind. She ran to her room, got a bow and arrows, and she slipped out the back door into the passageway. Mr. Little was in the kitchen under a radiator. He waited until he could hear the Newcombs talking in the living room. Then he felt it was safe to look around. Near the door into the dining room, he came upon Uncle Pete's sword. Uncle Pete would never let go of his sword, he thought. Would he ever let go, he thought again? Unless it was knocked out of his hand, maybe. This is bad. I wonder if. He put the thought out of his mind. Don't think it, he thought to himself. Just keep on looking. Mr. Little drew his sword. He went into the dining room. He kept close to the wall and walked slowly toward the fireplace. Just as Mr. Little was leaving the kitchen, Lucy got there. She saw her father go into the dining room. Sword in his hand, Lucy ran to catch up with her father, and was only a few feet ahead of him when suddenly a giant cat leapt out at them, out of the shadows. Lucy was never so scared in all of her life. She ran toward the cat. She ran without thinking. The gigantic animal had attacked her father. She would have to save her father now. The tiny girl came up behind the cat, with its long tail swishing back and forth over her head. She took an arrow out and she jabbed it as hard as she could into the cat's tail. There's a picture. She's very brave. And that's so sweet that she wanted to help her dad. Yo! Yelled the cat, and it ran out of the dining room, through the hall and into the living room. Mr. Little was not hurt. He jumped to his feet. At the same time, Uncle Pete and Tom came running out of the fireplace. They had been cornered by the cat and were hiding under the logs. Let's get out of here, yelled Mr. Little. He ran for the kitchen. Not without this, said Uncle Pete. He bent down and scooped up his sword. The four little Littles dashed under the radiator and through the trapdoor. Here's another picture of that. You see him? Well, I hope you guys are liking this book. We're almost finished with it. We only have a few more chapters and we're going to be done. And I hope you guys are enjoying your time off and doing fun things with your family and finding new things to do, maybe cooking or taking up new hobbies. Hopefully you guys are finding stuff to do and doing your schoolwork. I miss you all so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.